Hey everybody, this is Michael. I just want to give you a sense of what we covered in class tonight so that you're really good on the types of questions we're going to be doing in this course. So, here are a couple of examples of what I call Research 1.0 questions. They're good, they're authentic, but they're not yet researchable. So let's see what they are. The first is, how can I get my students to behave? Totally authentic, totally worthwhile, totally vague, not yet researchable. The second is, how can I improve my students' reading? Again, absolutely authentic and worthwhile, but not yet researchable. So let's kind of take a look over there, and Jasmine's going to help me by looking at these Research 2.0 questions. So you take this one, general, how can I get my students to behave? After you identify an intervention, you name the intervention in the question. For example, what effect do informal small group meetings have on student behavior? It's specific, it's measurable, and frankly, it gets to the Research 1.0 question, but in a measurable and specific way. So let's take a look at the second example. How can I improve my students' reading? Again, authentic and worthwhile, but hard to measure. You add an intervention and you get what happens when students participate in this reciprocal teaching. So of course, the good researchable question requires that the researcher actually figures out an intervention that they want to try. Again, it's just helpful for everyone to know, cohort leaders and students to know that there's lots of sample action research questions in course documents. So if you were here for the session, you use them. If you weren't, then I definitely recommend going to course documents so that you can see those. So finally, let's come over here. In class tonight, we identified some of the qualities of good questions, and I'll just kind of step out so Jasmine can see that. The first is that there's got to be an intervention. Something that you're going to do in the classroom that you hope is going to effectuate the outcome that you're looking for. Number two, it's got to be measurable, either quantifiable with some type of quantitative data, or qualifiable, or rather qualitative, so that you can see that there's some type of a change in something, behavior, academic achievement, motivation, but it's got to be measurable. Now number three, focused and specific. That especially has to do with the intervention. So the thing that you're going to do in class, it should be focused and specific. It shouldn't be too general. And finally, number four, what we mean by open-ended is that it's not a yes or no question. You are, you're open to the different grays and a lot of different effects. You're not just trying to say, does it work or doesn't it work? You want to see what the different effects of the intervention are. So finally, Jasmine's going to help me to explain one way that you might form your question. So again, lots of questions, authentic questions, start with the problem. Like this problem from before, how can I get my students to behave? But like we said before, you want to get it to that second generation of research question so that you're naming an intervention. So how might you do that? You start with the problem, then you flip it, which is really just a way of restating the problem, but in the positive. Not what's not happening, but what you want to happen. And Jasmine's going to show us what that looks like. Number three is probably the most important part. You identify an intervention, something that you hope is going to create the outcome that you're looking for. And then finally, you restate the question in a particular way, which is helpful, which we'll see. So Jasmine, you ready to work with me on this one?
Alrighty.
So Jasmine, what's a problem that you identified in your classroom?
My students are not intrinsically motivated to learn.
Boom. That sounds like a very understandable problem. So how would you flip that?
I would flip it by saying my students are intrinsically motivated to learn.
Okay, easy. And what's a possible intervention that you might try to try and create that change in intrinsic motivation?
Well, as a resource room teacher, I teach students in small groups. So I can provide them with student-centered topics by trying to figure out what their interests are to then provide individualized lesson plans to tailor it to their interests.
Great. So if you know what their interests are, you can actually use that information to create lessons or activities for them.
Exactly.
Great. So now the last part, so that you can articulate your question in a helpful, researchable way, how might you restate your question naming the intervention?
How would student-centered topics affect intrinsic motivation to learn?
Boom. So we started off with the problem, something pretty general, and then you actually wound up with a question which is specific and researchable. So I hope that's helpful for everyone, and I'll see you on the boards.